welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And this is part of the new special segment that I am adding on to the podcast. We started with our first episode about a week ago, but it wasn't actually with a crypto advocate. It was with somebody who's a currency trader, which isn't quite the same thing. But hey, you have to start somewhere, so we started there. But this time, we actually have somebody here on the Crypto Skeptic segment who really is an advocate, not just of crypto, but of Bitcoin. And I got to start off by saying he has the coolest name in the world, because if you're going to talk about creating new currencies, you want the word mint in your last name, because that's what it is. It's about creating new money. And his name is Brian DeMint. I mean, what a great name for a crypto advocate. So Brian, first of all, thanks for being on the program. Second, did you coin the name?
That is my real name. It's funny. That's actually, you picked up on that. That's part of the intro of my book. Is I talk about my name and how when I was in 8th grade, I'd never really thought about what the meaning of my name was. And my history professor, the history economics class in 8th grade, and my teacher said he was going through and kind of giving people the meanings of their last names. And he said, well, do you know what D-men means in your name? And I said, no. He said, it means from the house of, or it means kind of like, it's like a noble term of nobility. And then he goes, do you know what mint means? And he said, no. I said, no. And he said, oh, it means that your family was in coin minting or bankers. And so, oh, that's interesting. And as I was writing the intro of the book, I'm talking about this process and how I've always reflected on that and always thought that it had some, I don't believe in this really mystical kind of aspect of it. But it was like, well, I wonder if there's some sort of meaning for my life in this. And I also, interestingly enough, grew up on Sovereign Way. That was
I love it.
And so Bitcoin is known as sovereign money. So my name means money minting, and I grew up on a street named Sovereign Way. And so it seemed like a match made in heaven. Yeah.
It does sound like that's really cool. I love that. Well, I have to tell you, and I think I told you this before, we ended up agreeing to do the show here. But I actually was familiar with Bitcoin when it first came out in 2008. I was a skeptic from day one, actually, after what I read about it. And most of my skepticisms have proven truth, which doesn't reinforce anything good for me as far as I'm concerned. But we'll get into that in a moment. But I actually wrote a book about how monetary systems work. I wrote it in fiction form that I published in 2009. And then I went through a whole series of events that I kind of outlined quickly for you before we did the show. And my listeners know all about it, where I got to the point where I just need to make a massive change in my life. So I kind of left all that stuff behind. But now cryptocurrency has gotten to be quite a topic. And I figured, well, maybe it's something I know something about. Why don't we do something with it? And so I did a little looking around, and I saw that almost everything that's out there, there are a few people who cry, scam, scam, scam. But most of the people who are talking about it are advocates. I thought, well, it'd be kind of cool to get somebody in there like me who knows something and can kind of take the skeptic viewpoint. So that's what got us to where we are here today. And I'm very pleased to have you on the show because you have quite the background in it. I mean, you were, let's see if I got this right. You were chief marketing officer for Atheneum blockchain for 3 years. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And you're in the process of writing a book too. Yeah, the book is what? Bitcoin Evangelism?
Exactly. Yeah, I actually resigned from the marketing role because we were recognizing in that it's a blockchain, and I still believe in their vision. I really hope they succeed, and I keep in contact with those guys and stay involved in the community. But that blockchain is focused on decentralizing learning content education. So think of a decentralized YouTube, like for learning kind of a variety of content. So when I learned how to replace an outlet in my house, I can go on YouTube and learn how to do that. Well, but I could never put that on my resume, right? And so I wouldn't put, I learned how to change an outlet on my resume through YouTube. And so what this is doing, this platform is allowing learning content to be not only you to go on and learn that, but then also to take a follow-up test or have some sort of practicum so that you can display that information. Once that's achieved, then that learning information gets recorded to the blockchain, and you essentially have this immutable record of your education content. So hopefully, I think what they can execute on in the future, it's a pretty grand idea, but that there would be this smart resume where it has a really robust record of everything you've learned. So maybe, you went to school, you explained you went to school, you had a law degree. I have a degree in human behavioral sciences. and those degrees don't always apply to what we want to do in the future, but
Right.
maybe we've read, you know, hundreds of books or consumed thousands of hours on, say, political science content. There'd be a way for you to integrate that into a resume in a verifiable and you know, provable way, which is really interesting. And I think it's a great concept to it's kind of it provides a level playing field for everybody because anybody would have access to that. So that interesting idea. But what I was recognizing in that is kind of a complicated idea, and it's a complicated process for execution. And what we were encountering when we were seeking out capital for investment and just partnerships with other organizations, people didn't even understand what cryptocurrency was. And so they would always ask, what is this Bitcoin thing? Right. That was the question. I'm like, well, we're talking about Atheneum here, but they needed to start back at level 1. And so I actually resigned because I was so consumed with doing this, basically kind of evangelizing for Bitcoin when I was pitching our project. And so I recognized, you know what, we need to take a step back as an industry and still do a huge amount of education. Not everybody is as well read on the subject as you. I mean, you were a very early, pioneer as far as studying it and understanding it, because most people, it didn't even pop it into the zeitgeist, the public zeitgeist for most people until 2018, 2019, definitely more in the last couple of years. And so it's usually related to price. And so all people know is, Bitcoin's at 40,000, it's at 30,000, it's at 10,000. They don't know anything beyond that. Most people don't. And even people that have purchased these, whether it's Bitcoin or any of these cryptocurrencies, they couldn't answer kind of fundamental questions. So when they do go to their family and try to tell their family, because they're excited and it's this new technology, and then their family asks, well, what is it? It's like, I don't know. I think it's just going to go up in price. and so I'm not a particularly, academic or sophisticated guy. I like to read. I like to study. I like to learn. I love podcasts like this. But I think the strength of what I've written and what my mission is to hopefully apply some of these maybe more nebulous terms or more abstract terms, or they seem abstract to people, and give them kind of real world examples, or how does it apply to life today? And so it's just kind of like, if you go back to early email, most people, they didn't learn about SMTP servers and coding and how that works behind the scenes before they sent their first email. They just realized you typed out an email and you hit send, then all of a sudden there was this massive adoption of email. And I think that people with cryptocurrency, we rightfully so are kind of worried, because now it deals with money. It's not just sending information, or it's not just sending content. Now you have to have some skin in the game, whether it's big or small. I mean, you could send 5 cents worth of cryptocurrency. That's fine too, but people don't think of it that simply. And so there's going to be naturally more hesitation, more of a learning curve. People think of it more of as an investment rather than a technology oftentimes. And I like to think of it as a technology first. The investment side, I think, should only you should only buy any kind of investment if you can believe in the value and what it has or what it serves. Because I think that's one of the common accusations, and fair enough, is that what's the intrinsic value of Bitcoin, or what's the intrinsic value of cryptocurrency? And that's one of the things I try to make a case for. That I think I do a fair case in the book of making an appeal to why those things do have value. And so, I mean, we could talk about that hopefully today.
Yeah, that sounds great. I love the way you set all that up too. I do have to put in 2 little quick disclaimers. Nothing wrong with what you said, but my degree was not actually in law; it was in political science. I never got to the law part. Just so
sorry,
you know. No big deal, not a big deal. But I really should clarify that, because I never had a law degree. So if you're ready to write a lawyer about a lawyer letter to me, like here, what should I say to my accountant about? No, that's not me. Not me at all. Political science, that's as far as I got. The other thing that I
didn't mean to get you a bunch of direct messages.
And then the other thing I wanted to comment on, I do love the side of cryptocurrency, not cryptocurrency, but crypto, that is trying to deal with different ways of handling information. I think that part is really cool, because really it's about decentralization of information, not having it tied to one particular server or one particular authority or one particular person in control of it. And that has all kinds of possibilities. So when you were talking, for instance, about how Atheneum was trying to aim at a particular application of that, I said, oh, that's cool. I like that a lot. But like what you said, my concern about it has been from the beginning the fact that really the creator, that mysterious, I can't remember his name, creator of Bitcoin, was trying to create a currency. And it was specifically about creating a currency. And when I read about that the first time, and ever since then, all the things that were being claimed about it, well, not all of them, but a large number of the things that were claimed about it, I looked at that and I shook my head. I said, you guys got to be kidding. You guys got to be absolutely off your rocker. And just to let you know where I was coming from, the reason I knew about Bitcoin is I was philosophically a libertarian, and this basically came from libertarian circles.
Yeah.
So that's why I was familiar with it. I've kind of left that behind in my own life, but that's where my experience with it came from. And I could point to a number of things that really troubled me about Bitcoin even to this day. I'll tell you what the biggest one is. The biggest one is there are now something like 5,000 cryptocurrencies out there from the counts that I've heard. I haven't counted them myself. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody really has.
Doesn't sound like very fun. Yeah, like much
yeah.
fun. Yeah, no, I mean, to maybe add to that, I don't think anybody knows what the true count of it is, but if you go to Coin Market Cap, because you could create a cryptocurrency in your basement today and
right.
or a crypto blockchain, and it's all open source code, so we can just copy and paste it and it can kind of go on infinitely. But yeah, if you go to coinmarketcap.com, they're probably the most robust aggregation of all the coins out there, and they have, I think, over 11,000 listed on there. So yeah, it's a broad
it's crazy
market.
Yeah, it's really, really something. And the concern that I have about that is, last I heard, over $1 trillion has been invested in cryptocurrency, spread out among maybe not all 11,000. I know of one site that I saw that accounted for 1,000, and the number of 1,000 on the list had millions and millions of dollars invested in it. And the first question that goes to my mind is, okay, how many of those are actually likely to become currencies accepted by the mass populace? I guarantee it's not 5,000. Whatever that number is, I don't care what number you pick, 1, 2, 5, 10, 15. There's going to be a whole bunch of them that are going to go falling flat, and a whole bunch of people are going to lose their shirts. And the thought that goes through my mind is, what does that do for confidence in cryptocurrency? Nothing good that I can think of. So that's my biggest concern right there.
Yeah, and that's a very valid concern. That's actually, I share your concern. So as a crypto or Bitcoin advocate, I think that's a very valid concern. I think that what we're experiencing now, I've really tried to compare, and I think this is a common comparison. It's not my original thought, but there's a comparison to where crypto's at in relation to years of the internet. So in the 2008, 2009 timeframe, it was like the 1980s of the internet. Nobody knew about it. Only the programmers and the people at the universities knew about it. And then in the 90s, and so for a long time, for the last few years, we would say Bitcoin and cryptos in the 1994 to 1995, where some houses had it. There's a decent, I think 10% of Americans owned some sort of cryptocurrency or digital asset. And then now I would say we're kind of in that 1999 .com bubble area, and where I don't know if you remember any of the stories from that era, but there was business.com or pets.com or anything .com that was just a plain word and a .com. You could sell for incredible multiples. You could have bought it for $1,000 several years before and then sold it for $15 million just by holding on to it, not by developing the website or anything. There was a huge speculation around this. And then then it branched out into things that were like, why would you pay anything for that? It was like philslaboratory.com. And it was like things that were like ultra specific, but people were still paying $1 million for these random websites. And so it was just the thought that they were going to get the next, they would pay $1 million for a website because they thought that they would be able to sell it for 15 million. So that's called the greater fool theory for your listeners that aren't aware of that. Yes. Yeah. And you're buying something, you're hoping a greater fool will pay you more money for it. Right. And that is unfortunately a lot of how a lot of the crypto projects out there are. They can't articulate a use case of what they're doing. They have terrible tokenomics because that's one of the things that makes Bitcoin interesting is it has a very rigid monetary supply and very rigid monetary policy programmed into it. That's not true. A lot of people think they hear certain things about Bitcoin. Maybe they don't know a lot about Bitcoin, but they take those and they apply it to everything else. So Bitcoin will only ever have 21 million coins. That's why libertarians like it, and it has a predictable supply to get to that 21 million. That's definitely not true for the vast majority of cryptocurrencies out there. So they don't have a lot of these properties that make them at least even in the conversation. There's a reason why there's a conversation amongst the gold bug and crypto and Bitcoin community as far as whether Bitcoin's money or not, or whether it's sound money. And I think it's a great debate. I love hearing gold bugs debate Bitcoin advocates, because I think it's very interesting to me. But there's 99.99% of the other cryptocurrencies are not even in that conversation. So even if, Bitcoin's taken seriously by some people, these other ones should not be taken seriously in terms of money. Now, if they have a use case, and like in the case of Atheneum, their goal is there's a very specific use case. And that could be a huge market if that team executes on it. And that's the other thing. Then you have to evaluate the team. Who's the team behind it? Are they capable of executing on these things? And so I would say, I think that the easiest way for me to understand and kind of look out what are promising crypto projects and what are just outright scams, aside from if they have a use case or not, is I like to put things into baskets. So within digital assets, I would say there should be further asset classes. So if Bitcoin is like your digital gold, and so whether you may or may not be on board with that estimation as the crypto skeptic, but I'm going to put it in the digital gold category. Now you have Ethereum, which is the second biggest cryptocurrency in the world, or second biggest digital commodity in the world. That one you would compare more to oil. It's not a competitor. A lot of people think, well, if Bitcoin's number one, number two must be competing with it. It's not. They're actually complementary. The way that I like to describe that is imagine on your iPhone, you have a few different components, but two major components. You have Apple Pay. If you want to go to the store and check out with your phone, you can do that. And then there's also the App Store. Well, if Bitcoin is like Apple Pay, and it's your money or your payment side of things, Ethereum would be like the App Store. Ethereum's where it's a smart contract platform where you can develop other decentralized applications, and like what we were talking about, if you want to build decentralized infrastructure. So if somebody wants to make a decentralized Uber or a decentralized Dropbox to decentralize information and file sharing, those will be built on a platform like Ethereum. So those two things, they complement one another rather than being in competition. But those are things that we can pretty easily articulate. And not only does the market cap lend credence to that, but because there's a lot of investment in that, but there's tremendous use case and infrastructure in those projects, where most of these cryptocurrencies, it could be one guy in his mom's basement with some code. And those you should stay away from those things like your life depends on it, because they will take your money. And there might be some fluctuations in price. The price could go up. Those ones, it's not to say, because this is what those people will kind of push back, and they'll say, but I had a friend that put in $100 and he made $10,000 off of it.
Right.
So do people in pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes. There are people, that's the best marketing in the world, is having a few people at the beginning get rich off of it, and then tell the rest of the world. If you're not the first person, great. If you're the first investor, maybe you'll make some money off it. I still want to do it because I think it's immoral. But if you're the 10th investor or the 100th investor, you are the fool. It's like when you go and play a game of poker, they always say, you look around the table for the sucker, and if you can't find the sucker, then you're him. Yep.
And I play poker, so I know that rule. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. The other thing that's interesting from my perspective, I have to honestly say, I know a little bit about Ethereum. I really don't know a lot. I'm just starting my own investigation of it, so I won't claim to have any real strong knowledge about that. What I do know about is Bitcoin, and I'll tell you what my second objection to Bitcoin is: it's not scalable. From all the reports that I've seen, it's not possible with Bitcoin for Bitcoin to handle the level of transaction count that would be necessary for it to become a global currency. It's just not even within the realm of possibility. If you get to the point where people are trying to use it that way, I don't know exactly what would happen. My guess is it would just crash, just because it would not be able to keep up with the transactions. I think that the number I saw, that it could handle perhaps a maximum of 5 to 7 transactions a second, compared to, say, Visa that can handle 3,500 a second. It's not even in the same league. So how do you scale Bitcoin when it can't even scale?
Yeah, and I'll do you one better on that. And to start off, you're absolutely right on that. But I will have a follow up to that. So okay. So Visa, I believe, so they on average they do about 3,500 transactions per second.
So
I think they can scale up. Yeah. Yeah, you got that one. Absolutely. You got all of that right. You got Bitcoin's transactions
Okay.
right and everything. Visa, I believe they can even scale up to like 50,000 or 75,000
That
transactions
makes
per second
sense.
if they
Yeah.
needed to, because they're
Right.
centralized. It doesn't actually take a lot of computational power
Right.
to process transactions. The reason why Bitcoin is so slow and only does about 7 transactions per second is because it's designed to be slow in order to make sure that every node on the network is in agreement. So part of the decentralization, you're saying, hey, anybody around the world can be part of validating transactions and keeping an eye on the node and auditing the code every 10 minutes and auditing the blockchain every 10 minutes. But that takes time. And the power usage for Bitcoin isn't, I mean, there's massive use of power and electricity to mine Bitcoin and to make sure that the blockchain is operating. The power utility is not to process transactions. That's a small portion of it. The power is used to secure the network. And so the reason why it's so energy intensive is you would actually need to overcome the energy use of the Bitcoin network in order to hack it. That's why it's unhackable. So what I would say is that there's a trinity in the blockchain space, and no blockchain has all 3 of these. Bitcoin only has 2 of them. Bitcoin's the best blockchain because it has 2. There's speed, which you're referring to, which Bitcoin does not have. There's decentralization, and then there's security. Bitcoin has the second 2. It has decentralization and security. The most secure computing network in the world. It's more secure than any CIA server. It's more secure than Amazon Web Services. It's so broad, and there's so many components to the security. It's not just the energy use, but it's the openness of the network. So if there was a bug put into the code, you would have to hijack millions of computers all over the world simultaneously in order to input this bug. I mean, there's just so many elements that make Bitcoin so secure. So no other network can compete with Bitcoin security. But to your point, it's not fast enough to be used at scale. And what would happen is if all of a sudden tomorrow it was the world's money, it's not that transactions wouldn't go through. It would still only process 7 transactions per second. It would just, the fees would go up to insane amounts. The difference between Visa and Bitcoin is with Visa determines what the fee is. With Bitcoin, the people wanting to send a transaction, you bid on the fee you want to pay. And so people would say, I need to get this transaction through. So I'm going to spend $50 on a transaction fee. So there would be this market that would kind of propel the price up. So to your point, that can't work. That can't work for money. So the option, the thing that's being built, I don't know, have you heard of, or are you familiar with the Lightning Network?
Somewhat.
Have you heard that term? Okay. It's a fairly new, I mean, it's been in the works for probably about 4 or 5 years, but it's now kind of reaching a critical mass of adoption. The Bitcoin Lightning Network is a layer, it's what's called a layer 2 solution. So if the Bitcoin protocol is the first layer, Bitcoin Lightning is the second layer. And the way that works is yes, because Bitcoin, the base protocol, only processes so many transactions per second. But what the Lightning Network does, it's like a bar tab. So when you go to a bar, I'm not a big drinker. I don't really go to bars, but I've heard this is how it works.
Well, I'm concerned. The moment we're talking about cryptocurrency going to a bar, that I'm already concerned. But that's another topic.
Yeah, it's a weird. So you don't have to go to a bar to do this. But here's the analogy. So it's kind of like a bar tab. So if you go to a bar and you order a beer, you don't pay every time you get a beer. Your bartender keeps a tab, you order food, you order whatever, and at the end of the night, they close everything out. Same thing with the restaurant, right? You have a tab, and at the end of the night, they close everything out. They add your appetizers. So you don't have, 30 different transactions from your whole party that was there. You have one transaction at the end of the night. And then so what the Lightning Network does is it has a second layer of people processing transactions, and it can do this in real time, and it actually reduces the fees to virtually nothing. So it makes the fees less than a penny. So they're vastly cheaper than any kind of traditional payment rail that we have, and it's much faster than any traditional payment rail that we have. And so the Lightning Network, it's, I don't know if you've heard, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as one of its national currencies. It uses the US dollar, and it can accept Bitcoin. The Lightning Network is what their economy, their Bitcoin economy down there is operating off of. And so they're seeing huge volumes of remittances come in because they have a lot of people that are, patriots that live in the United States that send money back home. I believe that the metric was that their whole economy is only like a $5 billion GDP. Mm-hmm. And I think that they spent in the years before they adopted Bitcoin, like $400 million a year in Western Union wire fees. So it wasn't even that's what they were able to send back home. They were spending these exorbitant amount of funds on wire fees. And so now they're using the Bitcoin Lightning Network, and their economy saving, something like 8 or 9% of their GDP every year in wire fees as they adopt this technology and as they use this. So it's not that the Bitcoin base layer is going to be the solution. It's that the infrastructure built on top of it is going to be the solution. And that's true with the internet. We saw that, the original protocols for the internet, we haven't gone away from those. We've just built better infrastructure, better protocols on top of the base layer of the internet. And I think that's how technologies have scaled in the past. And I think that's how technologies will scale in the future.
I have to say, I love how you took my original question, morphed it into another question, saying it was a bigger question, solved that problem, and then left the first question alone. We still aren't talking about the scalability of Bitcoin. We're talking about a solution, so-called, that it's going to supposedly take care of that. But I know enough about technology. I mean, my background, I had the background in political science, but what my ultimate background became was computers. I found I was really good at computers, so my career actually built off of computers, and so I learned about computers a lot. And one of the things I know is that when you have a bottleneck, the bottleneck doesn't go away because you do something else. The bottleneck is still there. So address the bottleneck.
Well, this is taking care of the bottleneck. So because if I only can process 7 transactions per second, well, now if every one of those transactions I'm processing is a batch of 10 million transactions, that means that I can process 70 million transactions per second at my base layer. So what it's doing is it's making each transaction, each one of those 7 transactions per second, vastly more efficient. And so there's really no limit currently to the scalability of the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is aggregating tens of thousands of transactions, potentially even millions of transactions. And it's saying here at the end of the day, there's one transaction being sent to the base protocol. So yeah, I mean, it is a scaling up of the base protocol. It is making the base protocol more efficient because it's still only having to process 7 transactions per second. And so there's not an inflation of fees. There's not a lag in people that are trying to get a transaction processed that are waiting. They're getting an instant approval. So if in real time, what this looks like is you go into Starbucks, you swipe your QR code or whatever to pay to check out at Starbucks. Starbucks is instantly getting a settlement. So not an approval, which was like Visa and MasterCard. Visa and MasterCard, when you swipe your card, right? You're familiar with your audience, maybe not. They're getting an approval. And as a business owner, you know this too, right? You're getting probably about 48 hours later, after 3% of the fees are taken out, you're getting a settlement 2 days later. But with Bitcoin, it actually settles in real time, so that those funds go into your account directly. And this is in Bitcoin funds. If you're transferring it into U.S. dollars, which most businesses are going to want to accept U.S. dollars because of Bitcoin's volatility, there would still be a little bit of lag time while it transfers. But you're talking about real time cash finality settlement with this. And so that's what it looks like to the user. They're not standing there waiting for 10 minutes or 30 minutes at Starbucks, waiting, their coffee's cold by the time the transaction processes. It's already been settled on the Lightning Network. Nobody's waiting for anything. The immutability part, the fact that transaction will never be changed and is linked into the blockchain, that might take 30 minutes or 40 minutes until the Lightning node finally establishes it on the base protocol. But there's no reversal of that transaction. Nobody's not going to get paid. It's not going to not come out of the person's account that sent it. So it is an irreversible transaction at that point. It just hasn't been fully logged into the Bitcoin blockchain because it's being batched together with millions of other transactions or thousands of other transactions. So from a pragmatic standpoint, I don't think there's a delay there, and I think that it's actually a pretty good scaling solution.
I think there's still problems with it, though. Not the least of which I'll draw an analogy that I think most people are familiar with. One of the things that led up to the financial crisis in 2008 was the bundling of mortgages. They got bundled into these great big combination packages where they were being traded back and forth. You could buy shares in them and all that kind of stuff. And when all that was first created, they were called derivatives. When these derivatives were first created, it sounded like a great idea. Okay, here's a great way we can easily process all this stuff. We can handle a marketplace and then it came to a point where all of a sudden we need to have a way to unwind them, and there was no way to unwind them. And literally led to the financial crisis of 2008. It was not the sole contributor, but it was a major player in it. Yeah, and it was a completely unexpected consequence of those derivatives. And I don't think there's any way either you or I will ever be able to say, well, this solution isn't going to lead to consequences like that. It's going to create consequences. We don't even know what they are yet. To say, well, we've solved the speed problem because we've created this wonderful thing, basically leaves on the table a great big elephant that we don't even know what the elephant is yet. So no, I can't say that we've solved the problem. I think there's a whole uninvestigated piece there that we're just kind of dismissing because, we figured out a way to do it quickly.
Yeah. No, I love your enthusiasm on that, because so any of this stuff, we're in new frontiers. So if I sound like I'm saying that this is the end all be all solution, all I'm trying to articulate is this is what the technology is attempting to solve right now. And so I'm not saying that 5 years from now that Lightning Network is the sole thing, because there are actually more layer 2 solutions. Lightning is one group of developers. It's a decentralized group that represents Bitcoin principles and things, but there's all sorts of second layer solutions that are actually happening right now. I do think Lightning is actually probably the most promising. I would say it's different than the derivatives, than the bundling of mortgages, because in mortgages there's tremendous amount of credit risk, and really the issue was the ratings agencies within the 2008 financial crisis, because the rating agencies were saying these bundles of mortgages that were actually subprime mortgages were actually AAA rated mortgages, or AA mortgages. So they were saying that they were good, sound bonds when they weren't. They were garbage. That's a pretty different thing.
I'm not so sure it's all that different, to be honest. I think it's actually fairly similar. The reason I think it's similar is you have this system that is supposedly approving a whole bunch of transactions all at once, and the approval system is supposed to be working so well because so many different nodes are making the approvals at the same time. But if an approval is being made without anyone really looking at it, what kind of an approval is it? It's a numeric approval. It's not an actual approval. So I can't even begin to imagine all the different ways that it could possibly happen, but it's not difficult for me to imagine an equivalent, a monetary equivalent of a subprime mortgage problem seeping its way into that solution, because there's nobody actually looking at what's going on. I mean, to say that you could, put it this way, I know enough about computers that I can make a computer say 2 + 2 = 5. It's not hard to do. Any computer programmer of any level can do that. So the way I look at it is, anything that a computer programmer can make a computer do, another computer programmer can undo it in some way, and can find some way to undermine it. That's what the whole lesson about hackers is. What we now call hackers, not the original term. Anyone who's an original hacker, I'm not talking about you. You know that I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the scammers.
You don't want their heat from them, huh?
No, because what they did was legitimate work. It was very important work. I was very glad that they were doing it. I'm talking about the scam artists, the ones who just go out of their way to find a new way to invade somebody or take something from somebody or whatever. And that's not going to go away. But why create a system that makes it easier for them to get in there? Because a system that's unlooked at, that's a system that's easier to get into.
I love talking to you. This is really fun. So my last point on that, unless you had more to add, I do think that there is a difference between a credit instrument, like a mortgage, where somebody can choose not to pay on it, versus an account ledger, which the account ledger either says that there's funds there or not. And so that's the whole process of the system. It's validating that there's funds. The funds are sent out of the account. If I take $1 out of an account and put it into an escrow account to be transferred out, and I don't have access, I don't have a mechanism to pull that back, that to me seems different than a bundle of tens of thousands of mortgages. Some of them are good mortgages, or some people might pay their mortgage, some people might not pay them. I think that there's so many variables in a mortgage bond that's different than saying, okay, this person's account has $10 in it. He's going to send $5 of that out. We now have that $5 in an intermediary account. And it's accounted for in that sense. Now, to your point, Are there potential exploits in computer code? That's always a real risk. That is absolutely always a real risk. And that's why the decentralization of these systems, having more eyes on each transaction. It's not just one person, one intermediary keeping an eye on a transaction. So there's thousands or tens of thousands of people seeing every transaction. It makes it more secure in that element. But yeah, computer code is always an exploit, and that's actually for many cryptocurrencies that get the rug pull, or there's a smart contract exploit that drains the funds out of a smart contract. Yeah. That's exactly what the problem is. It is an exploit of the code, and people haven't gone in and read the source code and that sort of thing. So you're absolutely right in the fact that is the vulnerability. I'm just, again, trying to describe the solution that is being worked on.
Well, that's our role here, right? I'm the crypto skeptic. You're the crypto advocate. That's what we're supposed to do, right? This is the way the game is played.
And that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
So yes, fun. This isn't this may or may not be the answer. The leading candidate for the answer to this problem for speed is the Lightning Network. And like I would circle back to Bitcoin's strongest components. Its decentralization and its security are very, very impressive. So anyways, okay. Great point.
Well, let's zero in then on what I think is another major issue, and that is it's not a currency yet. And yes, certainly we could have all kinds of debates. I know libertarians, believe me, I know that circle real well. They could have all kinds of discussions about gold being currency. And I would say to them, hey, guys, gold isn't a currency. And here's how I know. I can't go to a restaurant with my gold coin and buy a dinner. It won't happen, guys. Sorry. It's just not going to work that way. So no, it's not a currency. I can see where I argued for gold for years, so I can understand the viewpoint that says it'd be great if we had a gold-based currency. We do not have that right now. We have not had that since Bretton Woods. So get over it. That's not where we're at right now. And I even take issue with the whole idea of gold being a hedge. It's a hedge perhaps against inflation as an investment in and of itself. It's useful in industries and so forth, but it's not a money. It's not a currency. Stop treating it like one. And the same thing is true for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not a currency. I mean, it just doesn't have enough transactions going on to call it a currency. And the reason is that it's not accepted. And that to me is also the big elephant in the room. Despite the fact that we're now we're in year 14 of Bitcoin, we aren't even close to it becoming an accepted global currency by the masses. Not even close. And one of the main reasons is because of all the speculation, which is driving the price up and down and all over the place. And who's going to trust a currency like that? A speculator will, sure, but will the average public? Absolutely not. They actually trust the dollar 1,000,000 times more than they trust the Bitcoin. And that's the whole basis of what currency is. If you don't have the trust of the people who are using it, you don't have a currency. You just don't. So there's another big elephant as far as I'm concerned. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you that it's not a currency. So yeah, I think part of the vernacular, as we call them, cryptocurrencies. And so I try to stay away from that. I do slip into that just because that's the common term. But I usually call them digital assets or digital commodities. But the same thing, I would say that Bitcoin, it fits the role of digital gold. It has some of those qualities. Of course, it doesn't have industrial use like gold does. But I would say that there is intrinsic value in the concept of being able to send a transaction without a third party for being censorship resistant. Again, it's not entirely anonymous. The way a lot of people like to say that Bitcoin was. That was in the early days. The libertarians like to say, "Oh, Bitcoin's anonymous," and it's not. It is. If you're doing illegal illicit activities with it, it is. There's enough on ramps. If you bought it through a regulated exchange. Now there are ways to mask and obfuscate your identity. That's a whole different discussion and not something that we necessarily want to be proponents of.
It's still not going to encourage people to become massive acceptors and adopters of it, right?
Right. Well, yeah, that's not. Yeah, you're right. That is not going to help the case. And so, to your point, I think I think what's going to fulfill the role of currencies are going to be central bank digital currencies or a version of the stable coins that are out there right now. I think that gold will be treated as a reserve asset. I think that it'll also. I think that there's a potential if solutions like the Lightning Network or if solutions to something that comes after the Lightning Network, if those are actual solutions that we see and they make Bitcoin valuable as a payment rail, I think that would it'd be maybe a bridge asset between currencies or for speeding up settlements. So yeah, I guess I would agree with you that it's not a currency in its form right now. I think the speculation of it, that the volatility of it makes it difficult. Yeah, I think as far as your point is acceptability. Now, I would say that there's things out there like services called like BitPay is one that comes to mind. There's a few other services that do similar things where you could pay a merchant in Bitcoin, and then the merchant can choose to accept either US dollars. It gets transferred into US dollars, or they can accept Bitcoin. That is becoming increasingly more common. Shopify, I think a month ago, announced that they are going to be using Lightning Network payments through their shop. So Shopify merchants can have a plugin that uses Bitcoin Lightning, and it virtually eliminates your merchant fee. So your 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction that you pay, you wouldn't have that. And it's instant settlement. So the funds show up in your account instantly, and you can choose to accept it in US dollars. And so you're actually getting a real-time US dollar settlement. It was sent via Bitcoin, but it's being settled in US dollars. At that same conference where they announced the Shopify deal, I believe it's called NCR. In my businesses, I don't use NCR for my merchant processing account, but I believe NCR is they do about 1/6 of all merchant payments in the United States. I think they have Walmart and Chipotle and McDonald's and a few of those companies. I don't know if you've heard of NCR before. Okay, so yeah, they're a rather big company.
Very big.
They announced that later this year, I believe Q4, that they will have a Bitcoin Lightning integration. So if that plays out, it is possible that by Q4 of this year in 2022, that you could go into Walmart with your Bitcoin and spend your Bitcoin in Walmart. Now, Walmart's not going to want to hold on to Bitcoin. They're going to transfer it instantly into US dollars. But as far as acceptability, that it would just lend a new wrinkle, I guess, to the acceptability argument. I think if anything, that actually that maybe suppresses the price a little bit, because every time that you're transferring your Bitcoin into US dollars, you're essentially making a sale on Bitcoin. And so it adds further liquidity to the market. So some people will like that. Some investors will like that. But it is, I mean, obviously you supply and demand. The more you're selling your Bitcoin, it's going to deflate the price. So if everybody starts using Bitcoin at Walmart and they're always cashing it out into US dollars, you could see possibly a decrease in the price, but a vast increase in the acceptability. So it's one of those things where you almost go a step or two backwards so you can go a step or two forwards. I don't know if that leaves you ahead or behind, but in terms of adoption, it's like I said, it adds a new wrinkle to acceptability. So is something acceptable? It doesn't mean people are accepting it if they're taking it in their store, but instantly changing it into something else. I think you can make the argument that no, they're only accepting US dollars. Ultimately, I would posit that yeah, no, they are accepting Bitcoin. They're using it as a mode of payment. They're just not holding onto that asset. They're not accepting that asset as a treasury reserve or something for their cash balance, but it is because it's reducing their payments. Now, this will be game changing if Walmart implements this, and Walmart can do away with, I'm sure they have better than 2.9% credit card fees. I'm sure they get a sweet deal, but say even if their credit card fees are 1%, if they could do away with 1% fees on all of their credit cards, that would translate into millions and millions of dollars of savings per store, and that would be a new frontier for acceptability. So,
but I would also point out that acceptability and adoption are not the same thing. The way you were describing there, you were kind of equating to, they're really very, very different. Acceptability is whether or not the merchant's willing to accept it. Adoption is whether or not the public's willing to accept it. Those aren't the same thing. They're quite different. So yeah, it's possible that there's a scenario under which customers of Walmart start using Bitcoin in order to make their transactions. Does that demonstrate adoptability, though? I'm not so sure that it does. If you're going to have an adoptability of something, it has to actually start playing a major role in the economy. And I don't mean a major role from the point of view of the merchants. I mean from the point of view of the consumers, because the consumers are really the drivers of the economy. We can debate economics a lot, I'm sure, but bottom line, if you don't have the consumers, you don't have an economy. You can have an economy without a whole bunch of merchants and creators and so forth, because there's always going to be some creators in there. So you can, even if you have a minimal number, you're going to have an economy. But if you don't have consumers, you don't have an economy. It's gone. instantly. So
Yeah.
consumers drive the economy, and if consumers aren't adopting it, I don't care how acceptable it is. Without the adoption, you're not going to get there. So I have really strong concerns about, even if Walmart does take this road where they start accepting it, does that prove adoptability? Absolutely not. I would say it's not even close at that point.
I think no, I think it's a great nuance that you differentiated between the two. As far as adoptability, I think adoptability is actually front running acceptability. So the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, they released a report. They did one in 2019, and they also did a report, I believe, last year, as far as Bitcoin, how many U.S. citizens own it in 2019. So 10 years into Bitcoin's existence, about 10% of Americans held Bitcoin. By 2021, that was up to 25% that hold Bitcoin or some sort of digital asset. The general adoption curve for technologies like this, the general rule of thumb is it takes about 10 years, and this is post-internet era. So this is mobile phones, this is applications and things like that. The first 10 years, the first 10 years, you get to 10% adoption. The second 10 years, you get to 90% adoption. If that holds true with this, the verdict's out on that. We'll see. But we've seen that. It took 10 years to get to 10% adoption. Then 2 years later, we were already at 25% adoption. So if that holds true by 2029, we should see, a 90% adoption rate. And I think that's the metric which we can base, is Bitcoin lagging, or is Bitcoin, exceeding adoption of the internet or adoption of smartphones or anything like that. I think that acceptability would hyperdrive the adoption as well. I think if people went to Walmart and said, "Oh, you can pay with this," well, hey, this isn't. They're kind of almost giving it a stamp of approval at that point. And so I think there's a self-fulfilling loop. I think that speculators will begin to buy it because they will say, "Oh, this is going to increase the price of it," and then there'll be news coverage on TV about how the price is going up. While at the same time, you're also seeing, "Oh, I can use it at Walmart." Then I went to Chipotle afterwards for lunch, and they're accepting it. And I heard my friends say that this is going to be the currency of the future. So I think there are self-fulfilling loops, but that is how technologies get adopted. And I think there were things in this last year, 2 years, that opened people's eyes. I think one of the things I wrote about in the book was self-sovereignty over your money, the ability to hold your money. You can do that right now, but you have to put cash under your bed, or you can buy gold and you can store your own wealth that way. Those are analog ways to do it, and that's the way people have done it in the past. But most people want the ease and convenience of having a digital form of that. That's why they keep it with their bank. With Bitcoin, you get that benefit of it being in digital format, but you can keep it for yourself. So people kind of understood that, but I don't think they understood the ability for government or companies to censor money. And so we saw that with the Canadian trucker rally. Bank accounts were being frozen and shut down by private companies. So donations were coming in to buy fuel for Canadian truckers. And the private company, what is that? The donation, I forget what the name of the donation company is.
I'm not sure what you're thinking of. I can't help you. Sorry.
So Give, Send, Go was the name of the company that ended up sending money out, but I forget what the name. GoFundMe. GoFundMe is the name. Right. Yeah. So GoFundMe didn't agree with the Canadian protest. And so they said any donations coming in, we're freezing them and we're just giving them back to everybody. So when finally Give, Send, Go, a competitor said, "You know what, we'll take the donations and we'll give them to the truckers." Then when they sent the money to the truckers' bank accounts, the government of Canada subpoenaed those accounts or filed an injunction against those accounts and actually froze them through the banks and froze those accounts. And so people's Canadian dollar accounts were frozen. The only way that the truckers were able to get funds was by people sending Bitcoin. And so whether you agree with the trucker protest or not, it opened people's eyes to the fact that companies can censor your money and that government can censor your money. Bitcoin was the last line of defense, unless you took somebody cash or you took somebody a physical thing, which you couldn't always do. And then with the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and now I think most people disagree with Russia invading another nation, but what we saw was there was economic sanctions that came down against Russia, a sovereign nation. So I think that also opened people's eyes. Wow, as an entire sovereign nation, you can be economically sanctioned. And so this idea of sovereignty over your money and censorship resistance, again, it's not censorship proof, but it's censorship resistant. censorship resistant money has kind of an intrinsic value to it. Now, what that intrinsic value is, does it mean that Bitcoin's worth $1 trillion, or does it mean it's worth $1 billion? That's a very big distinction right there. But it has some sort of intrinsic value to it. It has some value. And so I think that that will lend to adoption, that will lend to acceptability, and that will be kind of a feedback loop. So sorry for a very long-winded answer there.
That's all right. I'll just throw in one little piece before I go on to what I think is going to be the last question, because we're running out of time. Which is that I take issue with one thing you said. iPhones took one presentation from Steve Jobs to take off. It didn't take 10 years.
No, you're right. I think 2007, there was the next day they were sold out.
It was pretty much gone, right?
Yeah.
So
at that time, I was too poor. I couldn't afford an iPhone. So it took
well, I was too.
years.
My company was on the brink because of 2008. But Corey, who's listening in on the live stream, has been raising questions about the environmental side. You were raising that earlier on, but I wanted to spend just like the last not even 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, because I'm running out of time. I have my next episode to do after this. Yeah. But just very briefly talking about it, because the point that he's made in a number of different comments is that it's massively detrimental to the environment, that there are tremendous sustainability issues involved, and his concern is, well, greed is going to win every time, and we're all going to get screwed in it. So what's your take on that in about 2 minutes or less?
Okay, I agree. Greed. I have a whole chapter devoted to this in the book, so hopefully he goes and reads it. Greed is going to win every time. You're right. I agree with that. But I will say that Bitcoin miners, which are the thing that consume energy, Bitcoin miner is no more polluting than your Tesla car. And I don't think anybody ever thinks of that. Why is a Bitcoin miner polluting? It emits no CO2, just like a Tesla doesn't emit CO2. The fuel source, where you're charging that electricity, where you're getting that electricity, is the problem. So if you're burning dirty coal to get, or oil, or whatever your carbon emitting fuel source is, if you're charging your Tesla with an oil, a fossil fuel source, then yeah, your Tesla ultimately is a net negative in terms of, or net positive, whatever. It's damaging to the environment, even driving a Tesla. Your fuel source matters. Most industries have about a 20% green energy usage. Because Bitcoin is incentivized by greed, exactly what you talked about, the market will dictate that they will look for the cheapest fuel source. And so they have a 60% green adoption, a renewable wind and solar, hydroelectric, and even geothermal. El Salvador mines Bitcoin from their volcano using geothermal energy. They look for these renewable sources because it's the cheapest energy. So yes, greed in this case is good, and it is the kind of the solution to our green energy problem. So I'll repeat that, normal industries, about a 20% green adoption energy usage. Bitcoin is 60% plus, and it's increasing. It was about 50% last year. Every year it's increasing pretty substantially. And there's a long-winded answer there, as well as why I think Bitcoin's going to be the solution. I think it will be the solution to building out our solar grids and our wind grids. But unfortunately, I don't have time.
Yeah, that's the one problem with doing a time-limited event like this. But I have to tell you, thank you very much. This has been a really interesting discussion. You've taught me a few things I didn't really know about. I'm not sure we changed either of our minds, but hey, this was a good discussion, and I love that. So thank you for taking the time.
I love your pushback, and I would love to just talk with you more, because
it'd be fun.
Even breaking down adoption versus acceptability, those are great questions. So thank you.
Love having you on the show. And thank you to everyone who tuned in on this live stream special edition. There'll be more coming. Watch for if you're subscribed, you'll get instant notifications either to the podcast or on YouTube or wherever it is that you're tuning in. But watch for them, because there's going to be more coming. But thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time on LOA Today. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.